I'm Jo Hunt from Cardiff School of Law and Politics and the Wales Governance Centre. And today my contribution is looking at the proposals in the withdrawal bill and what they mean for devolution and our existing 20 plus years of devolution to Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland, and what the return of powers from the EU means to the existing territorial constitution. Now, as things are framed, devolution sees legal powers falling at Welsh, Scottish and Northern Irish parliaments and governments. But the proposals in the withdrawal bill suggest that when we leave the EU, these powers are going to be taken back to Westminster and to Whitehall, and further down the line a decision will be taken about where they go next, whether they are coming back to Wales, whether they're coming back to Scotland and Northern Ireland. The withdrawal bill itself contains a number of clauses which are particularly problematic from the perspective of devolution, and they are clauses 10 and 11. Now, the idea behind clause 11, seems understandable enough. What it's saying is that at the moment, EU law provides a framework for action, and it limits the potential for sort of great diversity to exist across the UK. Because EU law comes with requirements around the internal market, the EU's internal market, to ensure that there is free movement of goods, services, capital and workers around the EU. And that has consequences at a national level for the UK. And so EU membership has been part of the devolution story. It's been written into the devolution story. And the powers that Wales has and that Scotland has have been exercised in that context. But they are powers that have been devolved. And what we're seeing now is a suggestion that, to the extent that there are common rules that come from the EU, they should be maintained, at least for a transitional period. And then a decision taken about what is needed and what can be done away with. But the way clause 11 goes about it is in a way that is not particularly reassuring from the perspective of devolution, because it's up to the UK government and the UK Parliament, essentially, to decide whether or not these frameworks are needed for the future. So there are a number of possibilities of what we could do about that, what might be done about that. We know that the Welsh Government and the Scottish Government are working together to try and counter what we see as a recentralising, what's seen as a recentralising of powers through clause 11, and also to counter the potential exercise of powers by UK ministers across the devolved fields that they get through clause 10. So there are a series of moves afoot to try and challenge these proposals when we see the next stage of the withdrawal bill before the Parliament, the UK Parliament. Now, central to this is, what do we do about a UK internal market? The UK government has said it's essential that we maintain a UK internal market, and that's what clause 11 is seeking to do. But there are other ways of achieving that internal market. And we need to recognise that the internal market doesn't mean that everything has to be the same. It doesn't demand legislative uniformity. EU membership doesn't require things to be the same. And so whatever we do, we need to write in that space and scope for things to be done differently. That's what devolution is supposed to be about. So some of the things that could be done is to roll forward the internal market idea and to have it as a UK notion. But we need to think carefully about what are the principles and priorities in that notion of an internal market. Because it's not just about economic trade. It's not just about removing barriers. The EU notion also guarantees and prioritises commitment to equality, to environmental protection, and says that sometimes barriers to trade are permissible for those policies, greater good, that public good. And so we need some discussion around that. And what it also reveals is that we need some thinking, deep thinking about the intergovernmental and interparliamentary structures that we have in the UK after Brexit.